This shouldn't have happened, but it did. There was a moment in human history when stepping onto land was more dangerous than drifting into the open sea. Think about that for a second. For thousands of years, humans feared the ocean. Storms, drowning, starvation, monsters hidden beneath black water. But during one horrifying period, the land became worse. Entire coastlines turned into death traps. Cities became graveyards. And somehow, the safest place left on Earth was floating in the middle of nowhere. Most people have never heard this story because it hides inside one of the darkest disasters humanity ever survived. A time when disease spread faster than fear, when entire towns vanished in silence, and when the few people who escaped discovered something terrifying. Isolation at sea offered a better chance of survival than civilization itself. But the deeper I looked into this story, the stranger it became, because this wasn't just about survival. It completely changed the way humans saw the world. It began in the 14th century. Europe was already fragile. Kingdoms were overcrowded. Streets were packed with garbage and animals. Rats crawled through homes. Waste flowed openly through cities. Most people had no idea what disease even was. They blamed curses, demons, or punishment from God. Then, ships began arriving from the east carrying something invisible, something nobody understood yet. And within months, everything started collapsing. The sickness spread with terrifying speed. One day, a person felt feverish. The next, black boils appeared beneath their skin. Then came the bleeding, the screaming, the smell of death hanging in the streets. Entire families died inside locked homes. Workers abandoned carts filled with corpses because there were too many bodies to bury. Some cities lost half their population in weeks. Others simply stopped functioning altogether. And the most horrifying part? Nobody knew how it spread, which made everyone a suspect. At first, people thought the sea was the problem. Merchant ships carried the plague from port to port. Sailors were blamed. Foreigners were attacked. Harbors became scenes of panic and violence. But then something strange happened. The farther ships stayed from land, the safer their crews became. Some captains noticed that outbreaks slowed once they remained isolated offshore. Others refused to dock at all after seeing what waited on land. And suddenly, the ocean stopped looking like the danger. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship surrounded by endless black water, knowing the cities ahead were worse. Survivors described ports where church bells rang nonstop for the dead. Streets covered in abandoned belongings. Entire homes sealed shut with families still trapped inside. In some places, the living slept beside corpses because there was nowhere left to move the bodies. The closer ships came to shore, the higher the risk became. Sailors began fearing land itself, and that fear was not irrational. Then came the quarantines. One of the most important ideas in human history was born because of this nightmare. Port cities noticed that ships isolated at sea for weeks often avoided outbreaks on board. Venice became one of the first places to enforce strict maritime isolation. Incoming crews were forced to remain offshore for 40 days before docking. 40 days. Quaranta giorni. That is where the word quarantine comes from. Humanity accidentally discovered that separation could stop death itself. But by then, millions were already gone. And this is where the story becomes deeply unsettling. Because the sea was not truly safe. It only looked safe compared to what humanity had turned the land into. Medieval cities had become perfect, breeding grounds for catastrophe. Overcrowding, filth, trade routes, starvation, war, fear. The plague didn't just expose disease, it exposed how fragile civilization really was. The very thing humans built for protection had become the reason death spread so easily. But there was another layer people rarely talk about. Isolation at sea changed power itself. Ports controlled survival. Governments realized movement could spread disaster faster than armies ever could. Entire economic systems froze. Trade collapsed. Trust disappeared. Neighbors turned on each other. And while millions died on land, some isolated ships drifted offshore in eerie silence, temporarily untouched by the chaos consuming Europe. For the first time in history, humanity learned that connection could be deadly. Then came the twist nobody expected. The Black Death did not only kill people, it reshaped civilization. Labor shortages weakened feudal systems. Survivors demanded higher wages. Entire social classes shifted. Medicine slowly began abandoning superstition in favor of observation. Public health systems emerged from pure desperation. The horror was so extreme that it forced humanity to evolve. In a terrifying way, the plague dragged the modern world into existence. What actually happened was not that water became safe. It was that human civilization became catastrophically unsafe. The ocean merely offered distance, isolation, time. The plague spread where humans were most connected, most crowded, most dependent on one another. And for one brief moment in history, survival depended on escaping the very thing that made civilization possible in the first place: other people. That is the part I cannot stop thinking about. Humanity crossed oceans to build cities, kingdoms, and trade networks powerful enough to dominate the planet. But during the Black Death, all of that progress inverted overnight. The crowded world humans created became more lethal than the empty sea we once feared. And maybe that is the darkest lesson hidden inside this story. Sometimes the greatest danger is not nature. Sometimes it is the world we build together.